Well, hello there, and welcome to a tutorial for Creator's Kit version 1.5. Let's get into it. So, Creator's Kit is a plugin for creating objects, animating them, programming them to create custom scenes for videos, for thumbnails, for anything you'd really want. To start with this plugin, we're going to orient you to the different places that you're going to be looking for all of its features. So let's start with the config menu. When you open runelite's configuration, you can find the config menu under Creator's Kit. As you can see, I've starred this plugin so that it's pinned to the top. Edit plugin configuration, and you can see a host of different options. We're going to be walking through every single one of these. So, other place, the Creator's Kit side panel. Okay, this is where we're going to be doing most of our work. And then the toolbox, which is going to open up a new interface, which has a million different functions. And again, we're going to go through each of these one by one. But let's start really simple. Okay, first off, I want to get out of this annoying stuck to character camera mode. I'm going to get into Oculus Orb mode. So I'm going to find the Oculus Orb hotkey, which by default is going to be page up. As you can see, now I can use WASD as well as R and F to control the camera and freely move around. Very handy feature. We're going to walk through all these different Oculus Orb, all these different camera options later. We're going to start with some more basic functions of Creator's Kit first. But page down, that is your toggle free cam mode. Okay. Let's open up our side panel and let's add our first object. I'm going to start by adding the default crate. So when I hit add object, you can see a little panel pops up here. This is our first object, our first and only right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the control key. And as you can see, as I do and move my mouse around, I'm shown a preview of what this object is. And now I can just left click to place that object there. As you can see, when I toggle the control key, you can see that a little highlight is given to our currently selected object in the side panel, which is our object 0, which is a crate. Again, hold control and left click to move around. Historically, you would move around by using the home key, which will still work just fine, but new quality of life since then. Okay, so when you're making much larger scenes, you often want to name your objects, because it can get very confusing if you don't. So I'm going to call this crate. Hit enter. Now, something to note is that I am currently selecting the side panel here, this little box here. If I try and use any hotkeys over here, it's not going to work. I need to make sure I right-click the scene again at some point, or left-click for that matter. You can do either one to bring focus back to the scene and away from these little boxes. Okay, so I've renamed this crate. If I hold control, you can now see it's named crate. Let's get on to some other functions. So when you consider what an object is anything in the scene. It can be a bush, it can be a man, it can be a player, it can be a wall. Any of these can be objects, but each of them has a different 3D model. This is a good time to differentiate what object from 3D model is. The 3D model is determined by the model ID, or if we get to more complex models, it'll be a custom model, but we're going to get to that soon. Any object, like this crate object here, can have any 3D model. So if I change the model ID, you can see it associates with a different 3D model. There you go. Again, any 3D structure is a model. Any object can contain, can appear as any 3D model. Okay, so let's turn that back to our default crate, 7699. So now I've given my crate object the 3D model of a crate. All right, a couple different functions. We can spawn and despawn this if we want it to appear and disappear. Guy, look at him. What is he doing? What does he think he's doing? 1 second. Get out of here. Okay. Okay, and there's also hotkeys for that as well. If I want to change the spawn state, the active state of the object, whether it's spawn or despawned, I can use the insert key. Insert by default, you can change it in the config. Spawn hotkey is insert. Again, just as before, I mentioned that you can use the home key to relocate the object. Okay, next, we're going to change the rotation. So this is, as you can see, the crate is very slowly rotating as I'm holding this up key here. Jagex's rotation units are a little bit strange in that 512 is a 90-degree turn. Oops, let's not do that. 512 is a 90-degree turn. You can also use the end and delete keys to rotate by 45 degrees. So I'm using end to rotate clockwise, delete to rotate counterclockwise. Again, these hotkeys are set in the config menu. Rotate clockwise is delete, rotate counterclockwise is end. Okay, I can also, more convenient than using a hotkey, if I hold Control again to find that preview, and I click and hold the mouse and drag it in a direction, you can see this arrow appears to indicate the direction I want the crate to point in. And if I let go, there you go. The crate has now pointed in the southeast direction. So this is very convenient for very quickly organizing a lot of different models into different orientations. Okay, the radius key, the radius value, we're going to leave for now. We'll get to that in a bit. And next we have the animation, which crates aren't typically animated, so we're not going to show that right here. Instead, we're going to jump to grabbing models that are more complex than just one model ID. So if I hold Control, then left click over there to bring my crate a little bit closer to me. Once again, I can change this model into any single 3D model in the game. But a lot of the models you see around are actually combinations of different 3D models. This man right here might be model ID 5, 12, and 32 combined together. In fact, player models are composed of many different model IDs mashed together. You have a head, you have a chin, you have a torso, you have arms, hands, legs, feet, weapons, other equipment. All of those are different model IDs mashed together. And so just by scrolling through here, you're not going to find every option for every player or every NPC. These are just single models. But what we can do is we can grab models from players or objects or NPCs. In fact, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to right-click the tile underneath my player, and I'm going to hit Store. This stores what's called a custom model. It's not a model that exists by default. It's a model built from other models mashed together. And so if I change the mode of my crate object, I can toggle it between using a single model ID or using a custom model. Because I stored my local player, he now appears as a custom model in this drop-down menu. And you can grab pretty much anything by clicking it or clicking its tile and store it. So let's say I want to get this man. I'm going to store him. And I'm going to go to my custom models here, go to this drop-down and hit man. And there we go. That is how we're going to be getting most of our models. There's going to be some more complex mechanisms later, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So now this is a good time to talk about animations. So animation ID, that is, you enter in an ID and it will find that animation from the cache and apply it to our object. So to find animation IDs, there's a lot of different methods you can use. The most basic one is going to be using our debug overlay, or what do I call it in here? I just call it toggle overlays. And the hotkey for that is going to be page down. So right now I have it so that players will get an overlay, and objects that I create, like this crate, are going to get an overlay. I can change it so that game objects get an overlay. There's a lot of different game objects you can see. I can change it so that NPCs get an overlay. You can see the man and the rat have overlays. Ground objects, so those usually like little decorations like rocks or rubble or grasses. Walls should be pretty self-explanatory. Decorative objects, which are typically things that are put on walls. And projectiles, which there are none in the scene right now, so we're going to skip by that. But right now I have player overlay, and let's add an NPC overlay. Okay, so by default, let's get a really basic animation. You can see that when we add this overlay, you're given a little bit of information on the object or the item or the NPC or player that you have highlighted. So right now I can see that my player animation is -1 and my pose animation is 813. So if I go to my Creators Kit side panel and I enter in the animation of 813, hit enter, you can see my crate object is given a fairly normal looking idle animation, but he looks like he's trying to hold a staff. So let's actually, well, let's take off my Fashionscape Druidic axe and maybe my regular axe too. And you can see my pose animation is now 808. 808 is a very good number to remember. There we go. That is the most basic idle animation. Now, if we look at this NPC right over here who's walking, who's no longer walking, if I walk myself, you can see that my animation changes to 819, and there's a couple other numbers in there which we're not going to worry about. 819 for a walking animation. So let's just throw that, 819. There we go. That is a basic walking animation. Yeah, as you store different objects and NPCs, they're obviously going to have very different animations. Humanoid NPCs typically share a relatively similar set of animations, but there's going to be some more different ones out there. Let's take these ducklings. I'm going to store these ducklings. And remember that their pose animation, when they're still, let's get a little closer to them, is 6821. Okay, so I'm going to change this to ducklings. As you can see, these ducklings are not fit for a human animation, and I think I completely forget what the animation ID was now. Let's see. Oh my goodness, they've disappeared. 6821. Okay. Bring ourselves back over here. 6821. And there we go. If I just toggle this debug overlay off with, nope, I always mess those two up. Page down. You can see these are pretty normal looking ducks floating around. Okay. So let's move on from there. Let's do a couple more basic functions of objects. Obviously, you can have multiple objects in the scene. I can add more default crates. And as I add these objects, you can see that one of these objects in the side panel is highlighted, and the others are not. I can hover over them, but they are not highlighted. They are not the selected object. Whenever you're using any hotkeys or using Control-click, you always manipulate the highlighted or selected object. These others aren't going to get manipulated because they're not selected. So if I want to change the ducklings around, if I want to move them around, I have to click on that panel, and then I can hold a Control, click, drag, and change direction, and use insert to spawn and despawn. Use end and delete keys to rotate, etc., etc. So again, when you're manipulating an object, make sure you have it selected. And there is an extra convenience feature for this. If you hold Control and scroll, you can see that it scrolls through all my different selected objects. If I just change these models slightly, it'll become a little more obvious. Okay, I can place that one, I can place object 5, I can place the ducklings, I can place, I don't know what that is, object 1, object 2, object 3, back to object 4, back to object 5. So really easy to manipulate. And if we want to delete all these extra objects we created, you can just hit the delete button right there. You can also minimize these if you're running out of space, but there's a better space saving system we're going to go through eventually, so you might not use that too much. Yes, so duplicating. Duplicating is a very good feature. If I want more of these ducklings, I can hit the duplicate button right up here, and I can place that duplicate duckling wherever I want. I can also use the Control-D hotkey. So duplicate hotkey over here is Control-D. I can Control-D as many times as I want to add as many ducklings as I want. There we go. Let's see. Let's get rid of all these now. I don't need them anymore. Okay, so now I've shown you a lot of the basic functions. Let's get into something a little more advanced. What if I want a model that's not in the scene that I can't see right now? If, let's say I want a spirit tree. Not sure why that's come up, but let's find ourselves a spirit tree. So we're going to go through a couple different resources. The first one is going to be the minimal OSRS item database. It will be linked below. We can look for items, NPCs, or objects. We can search by name or by the item ID, NPC ID, or object ID. So spirit tree, that's probably an NPC. I'm going to enter in, let's see, spirit tree, hit go, and there we go. There's our selection of spirit trees. Now you notice it gives you the NPC ID. We're less interested in that right now. We're more interested in the model ID. So if I highlight this, copy that, and paste it into, let's say, our object 2 over here. There is our spirit tree. Now let's say I want an imp, but an imp isn't in the scene. Again, just do the exact same thing. I can, all right, baby impling imp. Here we go. Copy and paste that. There's our imp. You can do this for objects as well. Let's say I want to go and find let's say I want to see all the different crate options. There we go. All these different crates. And now something you'll notice here, this is a good time to point out. Under our model IDs, there are multiple models. This is going to be really typical for NPCs. And obviously we can't just copy and paste these models into this model ID entry here because it'll only accept one entry. So we'll get to how to deal with that in a second. Anyway, that is this website. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Let's deal with it now. We're going to open up the toolbox, and it's going to be a little scary, so I just want you to focus with me for a second as we hop over to the model organizer. So something you'll notice here is that all the custom models we've stored by right-clicking different objects or NPCs have been placed here. There's a couple different convenience options. If you open up this panel, you can delete the model from here, and by doing so, let's say I delete the ducklings. You'll notice that it is no longer under the drop-down menu here. Where'd that go? Went over here. You can also do a couple other things, which we are not going to touch right now. But a great convenience feature is the cache searcher. So again, I've mentioned, let's try to find the NPC low. There we go. The arrow seller from Verock. You can see all these different model IDs mashed together. Now what I could do is I could go in game, go to Verock, and right click and store low, but that can be really inconvenient sometimes. So instead what we're going to do is use our cache searcher to find the NPC by its NPC ID. So again, we are in the NPC category, and the column is ID, not model ID. Again, these are very different things. We're going to highlight Low's NPC ID, and we're going to enter it into the cache searcher and hit Add Custom Model. You notice that NPC is currently selected. Very important to select the correct ID. Add Model, and it finds Low. And now I can change our man here to Low with the duckling animation. So let's just change that to a standard 808. There we go. There he is. You can also do this for different, well, let's see the options. We can do it for different objects, different items. So let's say I want to find, here, let's just find an object by ID. Let's search IDs 100 to 200 and see what it comes up with. Party balloons, that's pretty good. Might take those. Oh, this is nice. This is, actually that is kind of ugly. Oh dear. Sure, let's go for this ladder. This ladder has an object ID of 195. Again, we are in the objects category and looking at the ID here. 195. So if I enter in, whoop, not that, 195 and hit object, I can hit add custom model, and it finds our ladder as a custom model. There we go. There he is. Let's see. We can also do it for ground items or worn items for the male or female, like a rune plate body, for example. Ground items is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to go to the items category, and let's say I want to find a shark. Again, it has a model ID, but I can also use the cache searcher and put in its item ID. There's our shark. There we go. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, that is the cache searcher. How else can you find models? Well, there is this fantastic website called RuneMonk, and let me just bring it up here. Let me very patiently bring it up here. Okay, RuneMonk. It's going to be linked in the description again. You can search up NPCs, objects, items, models, spot items. Very useful. So let's say I want to find, let's go with Verzik. There we go. That looks like Verzik. Going to go to its data tab. You can see this model is just composed of one model. So if I wanted to enter it in as an ID, that would work perfectly fine. And obviously I would change the animation. In fact, let's use RuneMonk to find that animation. Standing animation of Verzik is 8051. 8051. There she is. That looks a lot more like her. But again, I can also use her NPC ID, open up the cache searcher, enter that in, NPC, add custom model. There's Verzik right there. And I can set it to her again. There we go. That is RuneMonk. That is the minimal OSRS database. What else do I want to look for? Yes, there is one other source I will use for animations, and I will have that linked below as well. It's an animation dump. So this is useful for getting very niche NPC animations. If I want to find all the animations associated with Verzik, I can just hit Control F, enter in Verzik, find the linked animations for Verzik Vitur, which 8051 is a standing animation we used. 8107, it's going to be a different animation. Let's give that a go. Slightly different. 8109. There we go. It's another for animations. 8110. So yeah, you can find, this is a handy little cache dump, which I use quite frequently for finding animations. I'll have that linked as well. All right, so that's our 3 resources I wanted to go over. Oh yes, this is a good point to show you what radius means over here. So most of the objects you're probably going to be dealing with are going to occupy a single tile. But there are some objects that are much bigger than a single tile. And as you can see, as I'm rotating around Verzik here, you can see that she's clipping with the ground tiles around her. What I can do is I can increase the radius until it reaches a point in which she overrides the surrounding tiles. There we go. That looks better, but you can still see it's clipping here. I'm going to increase that a little more until she's this big model. Okay, not quite. There we go. Now you'll notice that it also starts to override surrounding objects, and that's just one of the consequences of how runelite likes to use its different runelite objects, so to speak. So you do have to be pretty crafty about how you construct some scenes so that it's not obstructing nearby things and causing a mess like this would. Again, if your radius is much smaller, you're not going to have that much of a problem. You're just going to have more glitchy surroundings with the surrounding tiles. Okay, so I think that is most of our basic functions of creatorskit. Let's just go through our config and make sure I haven't gone completely crazy. All right. So I do want to talk a little bit more about the overlays just for a second. If I hit page down to toggle them back on, you can see there's a couple different things that show up. Over players, you'll only get the animation and pose animation. Over NPCs, you'll get the NPC ID in case you ever want to search it up in the minimal OSRS database, for example. You can also find the NPC's animation and pose animation. Similarly, if I go to most objects, you'll get the object ID. So 4739, if we entered in 4739, we would find that piece of grass in the minimal database. Anything else here that's worth mentioning? No, not really. Yeah, that's okay. Let's quickly talk about spot NMs. Spot NMs are these graphical objects that overlie players during certain animations. Very typical with spell effects. If I high alch, you can see a spot NM 113, which is the glowy orb that appears, is going to appear with my player. If you ever need a spot NM, which is a very niche function, you can enable the right click to grab spot NMs and store it while it's active. And therefore, when you, let's say I take this object right here, I change to custom mode, and I go down to spot NM 113, there it is. It'll even give you the animation when you store it. So 666. There we are. I'm going to turn that off now. You probably don't need it most of the time. All right, so we're going to enter into some scary territory again and open our toolbox. Now, what happens when we have too many objects in our side panel? Let's say I'm creating a massive scene and I have all these different objects. this will get really unwieldy to navigate. So what we can do, let me actually, one second, let me clean this up a little bit. In fact, let me use this handy clear all objects button. Don't know why that's appearing down there, but all right. Hit yes. And there we go. All our objects are now deleted. Let's start fresh. Let's get our local player, hold control, left click, animation ID of 808. Point him in that direction. Let's grab this man over here and duplicate this so I can keep the same animation ID. Going to switch from local player to man, hold control, left click over there. Oh, another convenient feature. If you hold control and right click, you can store add. So if I take this player over here, I can store add this guy, and it immediately creates a new object for me with that player's model. There we go. I'm just going to turn this overlay off. It's getting a bit annoying. Yeah, so again, nice little convenience feature. Store add by holding control and right clicking. You can also use this on objects and other things around the scene. Okay, yes, let's say I have all these different objects. In fact, let's create a scene. I'm going to move this bush over here. Yeah, it doesn't quite match the other bushes, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. Let's duplicate this object a bunch of times. So I'm going to hold control and press D to duplicate it. Okay. There we go. Bunch of different objects hanging around. Let's just move our players to a better position. Where's that man? So, okay, here, this is a great demonstration of the problem. I'm trying to find this man here, and he's up here, but that was really inconvenient to find. In short, there are too many objects in the side panel. We need something to manage them. Look at that. Here is a manager to do just that for us. So what we can do is we can create new folders to store our objects. So this is the master folder. You can always add objects to the master folder, but I like to create a bunch of subfolders. Triple click this. I don't know why it's triple click. I did not decide that. And I'm going to create a bush folder. So what I'm going to do to these bush objects is I'm going to hit the switch button. When I hit this, it's going to add that object. It's going to take it away from the side panel and add it to the manager to the currently selected folder. As you can see, this bush object has now been placed in the bush folder. I can do that a bunch of times. If I want to move all of these guys, as you can see, our bush folder now has all this 15 or 16 or so bushes. Let's create another folder. I'm going to add it to the master folder again, and I'm going to rename it to people. Let's get, let's duplicate this man a bunch of times and make sure our currently selected folder is people, and switch these guys, these men over there. There we go. Pretty convenient. We've just created two folders and neatly organized them. As you can see, when I click the different folders, it'll show all of the objects in that folder and all of its subfolders. So let's say I wanted to add a subfolder in people for man. I want to move all these objects into the subfolder. I can just drag them over there. I can also select one of the objects and hit shift left click to grab multiple of them and drag them all over. There we go. Now let me create another subfolder under people for, let's say, me. If I want to duplicate myself a bunch of times, make sure me is selected, and move these local players into that folder. There we go. These are all my local players, and I can move around the folder as I so please, just like so. And if I hit master folder, it'll show absolutely everything. So yeah, very useful for organizing a lot of different objects and moving them out of this side panel here. A couple other quick features. I'm going to add one extra folder, change that name to miscellaneous. If I want to move, let's make a couple more objects in the side panel here. If I want to move all of these objects into that folder, I can hit switch all. There we go. If I open up this folder now, the miscellaneous folder now has all these different objects inside it. I can also do the same in reverse. If I hit switch over here, as you can see, it is brought back to the side panel. If I hit switch all over here, it'll take all these objects under people and move them to the side panel. So pretty convenient. And that looks like a bug. I'll have to investigate that one. Okay, let's get rid of all of these. I don't want all these anymore. In fact, if I go over here and I can remove all of these, this removes the individual folder or object, or you can hit clear to remove everything. You can also add objects from this menu, just like over here. I don't find it very useful, but hey, it exists. Okay, let's move all those bushes back over here and get rid of some of them because I don't really want that many bushes. In fact, let's just get rid of all of them and add ourselves a couple new local players. Okay, so that is our manager. Oh, another important thing. Let's move all these local players into the bush folder for a second. I put a lot of work into making this scene. Well, actually I didn't, but let's say you did. Now, let's say I want to close my client and come back and reopen runelite another day. I can save this setup for future use. If I hit save setup, I can save it as, let's say, creatorskit 1.5.0, just so I remember. Hit save, and there we go. It is now saved. Let's say I either delete everything or I close and reopen my client and everything's fresh. I can hit load setup, find, where'd that go? creatorskit 1.5.0, and everything is brought back just as I had it before. And as you can see, put back in the scene. Yeah, so very convenient. Let's move on now. Let's see, what do I want to do next? Yes, you can do something very similar for the custom models. So we spoke about custom models quite a bit earlier. If I just move this back to the side panel, custom models are all the models that we've placed in here. First off, as you can see, this is getting a little bit unwieldy. Before I do anything, I'm just going to clear all the unused models. As you can see, these are all the models in the dropdown. I'm going to clear all the unused ones, and we are left with our local player, the one with the Staff of Fire and the one with the Druidic Staff. But let's say I want to just save this individual model. I can hit the Save button, save it as whatever I want, sure, local player, and I can load that custom model back up. So it's somewhere in here. Now this is getting a little unwieldy, I have to admit, but hey, this is that's the way it is. Reloaded up that local player. As you can see, he's back here. Let's do something a little more obvious. I'm going to store this fountain here. Open up our toolkit. Save the fountain as fountain. delete that fountain so I no longer have it, just for demonstration purposes. Hit load custom model and find fountain. And fountain appears back over here. And let's just quickly set that radius so it doesn't look ugly. Beautiful. Okay, so yeah, being able to save and load things, very important, something to keep in mind as you're working. Next, I would like to, let's start programming. Okay, I'm going to clear up this scene a little bit because this is a bit, we have a couple things too many. I'm just going to delete all of these. There we go. Start roughly fresh. Select our object over here. I'm going to call him, let's give him my name, even better. And let's hide my real characters so we don't get confused as to which is which. I want to now program this model. I want him to move across this courtyard over here. It's not just an animation. Animation is like how the model manipulates around itself, around the one tile that it's contained in. To program, we're going to do something a little bit different. First off, I'm going to make sure that my overlays is toggled on. So I'm going to hit page down. And I'm going to make sure object path is toggled on. Okay, now there's a bunch of hotkeys here for programming. We have, let's start with adding a step. So this adds a step for the player to walk. We can add as many steps as we want, and the player will be able to walk between them. So if I hold Control and hit A, you can see a step is added. One second, I'm just going to hide the My Object overlay, and unfortunately it's been randomized to a very inconvenient color. So I will go through exactly what I'm doing right now in a second, but for simplicity, there we go. That's still not good. That was really one of the worst choices I could have chosen. Oh, that's better. Okay. All right, as you can see, it gives him a little initial, because when you have a lot of objects, using the full name is pretty difficult to see your objects by that point. We added a step by hitting Control A. So I'm going to add another step by hitting Control A somewhere else. Control A over here. So as you can see, a path is drawn for my player to walk. Now I can hit Control Space to play the selected objects program. I'm going to hit Control Space. As you can see, he slides along the ground very smoothly until he reaches his destination. We're going to play with those animations in a second, but let's reset that with Control R. Again, Control Space to move, Control R to reset. I'm going to clear that program with Control C. And we're going to start again. We're going to add a different program. Control A to add step. Control A to add step. And Control Space. There we go. Let's add a couple more steps. All right, as you can see, he walks through his little path that we've set. You can add a hotkey to remove program step. I don't find it extraordinarily useful. Usually when I want to reset someone's program, or not reset, usually when I want to recreate someone's program, I'll just hit Control C and we'll just start from the beginning. But yeah, that's entirely up to you. Okay. Let's play with some of those animations, because him smoothly walking does not look great. I'm going to open up our toolbox again, and I'm going to head to our programmer panel. As you can see, the programs are divided into the side panel objects, the panels over here, the objects over in the side panel, and manager objects, the objects in the manager, which we have none right now. So it'll give us the name of our object. It'll give us the idle animation that we've set over here. It'll also give us the active animation. What animation does he play while the program is active? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk myself As you can see, I have my debug overlay turned on right now. I'm going to unequip that just so we get a normal looking animation, not one with a staff. And I'm going to have my character walk. As you can see, the walking animation is 819. So I'm going to open my toolbox and enter in 819. Okay, bringing ourselves back here. I hit Control Space. There we go. Pretty normal looking walking animation. Other things we can do, we can change the speed of the program. Hit speed 2. So this would be toggling between walk and run. As you can see, he's still using the walking animation. So let's find a run animation by watching my player's overlay. 824. Open that back up here. 824. Control R to reset, Control Space to play. Pretty good. Okay, other things you can change, the turn speed. So if I want him to turn really rapidly for whatever reason, Control R to reset. As you can see, look at how fast he rotates through. Demonstrate that one more time. Other things you can do, you can also turn the speed to 0. If I want to, let's say, let's Control C to clear that. If I want him to just turn around, I can hit Control A to point him, here, Control A, add our first step, Control A in a different direction, and if I hit Control Space to start the program, he can't move because he's speed 0, but he will rotate and play his animation. So if I just want a very basic rotation, let's hit Control R to reset, Control Space. There we go. Pretty natural looking turn. Okay, so that is the very basics of programming. Oh yes, other things. Loop should be pretty self-explanatory. Just going to change these back to a normal walk. As you can see, his program's active, so he's going to do a nice little loop. If I reset, Control C to clear, and let's see, how can I do this? Add a bunch of steps to have him move in a rough circle. Make sure loop is toggled on. Control Space. He will simply loop through that entire animation. So yeah, there we go. That's looping. Reroll color. So I think I already kind of showed what that did, but it just re-rolls the color of this person's path, of this object's path, I should say, for clarity, really. It's randomized when you create the object, but you can just re-roll it for visual clarity. Movement type, you're probably not going to worry too much about. You can use normal for walking on land, waterborne, if you're trying to walk on the ocean, which was important when I was creating these sailing videos, because I had to show ships moving on water. You can also choose Ghost. Ghost is a special case. I'm just going to Control C to clear, and I'm going to add steps which cross over objects you shouldn't be able to cross. As you can see, he now ignores all barriers and will just walk a direct line. Can be useful if you're programming flying creatures and want them to fly over some basic objects. Okay, Control R to reset that. Now let's say I have, well, first off, let's set that back to normal. As you can see, the program has to reorient itself so that it's no longer walking through walls. But I'm going to Control C to clear that. I'm going to give him a very basic loop. And I don't want it to loop right now. The rest of that looks good. Let's say I have multiple objects. Let's say I hit Control D to duplicate this object. As you can see, it'll also duplicate the program that you've created. And even if I move this object around by hitting Control and left click, it'll move the program with it. As you can see, in certain places, it'll actually break the program. You can't have steps over places that are obstacles that'll block your path unless you're using a ghost movement type. But otherwise, it'll reorient itself such that it chooses the shortest path. Now I can hit duplicate again. Let's just create a couple more. Nope, that did not work. So control left click. Let's find a place where you can walk. Come now, it's gotta be one. There we go. Now I have a bunch of programs at the same time. Let's say I want to sync them up and have them play all at once. There's a couple hotkeys for that as well. To play or pause all, you can hit Control End. Control End to pause again, just like we use Control Space to play and pause. As you can see, they're all walking now in sync. I'm just going to hit page down so that you're no longer distracted by the overlay. Control End. And I can hit Control Home to send them all to their starting location. Control Home. Control End to play and pause. Control Home to reset everything. So once again, slightly different from what we had before. If before we were using Control Space and Control R to reset, Control End and Control Home will play and reset everything. Yeah, pretty neat. That's about all there is to programming. That is a system that is in current development, let's say. There's a lot of more fancy things I'd like to do, but that you can't do at the moment. Okay, let's move on. Oh, yes. Quickly, very quickly. We are going to, let's say we have, let's give these guys a different animation. 866, that's a good animation. I'm going to clear his program, place him right there, and delete these. Let's duplicate with Control D. As you can see, none of their animations are synced. If you do want to sync them, you can use a couple different options. You can either sync all the idols, which will sync every object's file in the entire program, like so. You can also sync the shown idols. So if you're just seeing these guys right here, let's say, okay, let's make a proper demonstration of this. Let's store and add this man right here. Let's throw him in the master folder with the switch button. Duplicate him a couple of times. Let's throw him in the scene. Again, I'm just using Control Scroll to move through all these different man objects. It's very handy to have a second monitor, so you can have the toolbox on one monitor and your runelite on the other. So I'm just going to give these guys animation of dancing as well. Okay. As you can see, these guys are not synced, and I'm going to just despawn and respawn the rest of these guys so they are unsynced as well. Okay, so if we open our programmer, we can sync all these shown idols, which will sync everything that you see here. So all the Druid players, this would sync all of them, versus sync all idols will sync everyone's idol animations. So if I hit sync shown, just the Druids. If I go over here, I can hit sync shown idols again. There we go. It'll sync all of the men here. And if I want everyone to be in sync, sync all. Okay. That is going to be enough for the programmer. Yes, I think I've probably done that to death. Let's move on to the next important piece of the plugin. This is one of the most complex parts of the plugin, so you're going to have to bear with me a little bit as we go through this. This is the model anvil. First off, let's just clean this place up. Don't need all these guys anymore. Manager, clear all. And let's just start with Hans here. Give him a nice old animation of 808. So something that you can do in Creator's Kit, if storing an object takes multiple models from that NPC or that player or that object and mashes them together, it kind of implies that you can mash just about any model together. And that is what the model anvil does. The model anvil takes different models, I should say, from the cache and merges them. So let's demonstrate that. We're just going to start with our basic crate again. And we are going to name the custom model to crate Anvil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit forge, and a new custom model will be created called crate Anvil. Again, that's just a basic crate because all we did is we added one model ID to the model anvil. But what happens if we add more? So let me just get a good angle here so we can really see what's going on. That was not the good angle I was looking for. Let's, okay, here we go. Let's say I want to have two crates together as a single object. I can hit add another crate, and I want to offset it one tile in the X direction or the east-west direction. And I'll do that like so. And when I hit forge and set, it'll create a new custom model and immediately set that to the selected object. So forge and set. There we go. Now what I've done is I've created a single object, or I haven't created an object. The object has always been Hans. I've created a single custom model that is two crates merged together. Pretty interesting. So let's say I can change the dimensions all I want of these guys as well. If I want to increase it in the north and south direction, I can do so just like so. If I want to increase it in the height, there we go. It's now slightly higher up. Very, yeah, it's hard to grasp how complex this is going to get. And how powerful it gets. I can also increase the direction by a subtile. So if a full tile is 128 subtiles, I'm saying that backwards. A full tile is 128 subtiles. So let's just say I want to slightly offset it in the X direction by half a tile. There we go. One second, I'm just going to orient this in a standard orientation, so it's a lot less confusing. And oh my goodness, there are so many players around. Or NPCs. This is extraordinarily distracting. There we go. Okay, so now I've moved this crate a half tile or 64 subtiles in the X direction to the east. I can also change it so that it's only let's say, that's going to be too small, 20 subtiles. As you can see, they're even closer together to the axis point, the center of the object. I can also scale up models. So I'm just going to remove this second crate, and I'm going to go to our scaling factor here. And I'm going to increase this crate scale, not by that much, by 256. That is taking the default scale of 128 and doubling it. So our crate is going to be double in size when we forge and set. There you go. Double in size. Pretty standard. I can also rotate it by 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees. Pretty simple stuff. I can invert it, which is... No, I'm not going to bother explaining that. That's complicated. I can also, of course, change the model ID. So let's say I want to do something a little more complicated. Do I go there yet? Yeah, I do. Okay. Let's say, gonna turn off entity hider. I want to grab this man here. And this time, what I want to do is I want to send his models directly to the Anvil. So I mentioned before that a lot of NPCs and players are composed of a number of different models. You have a head, you have a chin, you have a torso, legs, so on and so forth. What the Anvil option does is it takes that man and it breaks him down into his different models. So you can see this man is composed of 8 different models. Model ID 235, 253, 292, 177, so on and so forth. And if I were just to forge and set just as is, what you would notice, let's make sure we're doing a live demonstration of this. It just recreates the man just as he is. But we can do a lot of tweaks if we want. Let's say I want, this is probably going to be his head right here. So let's say I want to, for whatever reason, double the size of his head. Forge and set. And it also goes up. So we're just going to move it down a bit. Not that far. Let's move it down in the Z direction by, I don't know, 100? Minus 100 would probably be more accurate. Okay, let's try minus 70. Okay, we're getting there. 60? Yeah. Listen, I'm not very good at this plugin. And I'm going to do the same for the chin slot, which is probably going to be this one right here. There we go. Look at him. He's just as the Gower brothers intended. Yeah, so you can modify the individual models, and you can even add different models to the object as well. If I wanted to add this bush, I could anvil that bush. You can see here, the bush is now placed as a different model. I'm just going to rename it for clarity. This name doesn't have anything to do with anything really except for making sure you are clear on what object is what. And so I will, well, okay, I will do that just so it's very clear to me what I'm modifying. And if I hit forge and set, there we go. The man now has a bush attached to him. I can even program them so that they move together. Pretty neat. Okay. So now that we have our Hans, that's not Hans, that's just man. Now we have our man here. We can do a bunch of other modifications as well. So I've already shown adding different objects. You can also duplicate these objects for whatever reason that you would want to. Not the most useful. If you want to remove something, let's say I want to remove his boots. I'm going to guess that this right here is his boots. Let's just orient ourselves so that we can see this guy properly. Okay. Let's remove this and see what happens. There we go. His boots were removed. I also removed the bush as well. So now he doesn't have that anymore. Probably doesn't need it anyway. What you can also do, there's also a cache searcher here as well. Just like the cache searcher we were using in the model organizer, we can use this cache searcher to find an NPC directly from the cache without having to right-click and anvil that character. So if I go to our database here, let's find our good friend Lo, NPC ID over here. Let's just clear this so we don't have to deal with that anymore, the man, and add models and forge and set. There we go. There's old Lo. And then we can do whatever modifications that we want. What was it, minus 80? Oh, one of these is probably his eye patch and one is probably his head. Let's make sure his jaw is in there as well. Beautiful. That's just extraordinary. Okay. Next thing. So yes, use your cache searcher to find an NPC or object or item and add it in. In fact, this is a good time to demonstrate what would happen if we wanted to add a different plate body or a different torso to low. If I go over here and I go item search by name, let's find rune plate body. Item ID is 1127. I add 1127 and hit add models. And 306 is probably the one that it is because it was added last. If I hit forge and set, as you can see, a male rune plate body is now added. As you can see, we haven't removed his other torso, which is still in there somewhere, but we're not going to worry too much about that. No, in fact, we're going to worry about that right now. Let's see. What color would it be? Don't worry about what I'm doing. We'll all things in good time. Nope. It's definitely not it. That's not going to be it. That's probably it. 293. Get rid of that. Forge and set. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Okay. So that is the power of the cache searcher. Other things you can do, lighting settings. So if we take a look at, what's a good example? Yes, this is a great example. If we look at, no, we'll just use low here. Okay. First off, let's turn off entity hider. Let's grab this man right here. Turn him into object. If you look at the lighting differences between the object we've just created, or the model we just created, why? Why would he do that? If we look at the lighting differences between the models we just created, we found the man and gave him an actor lighting, which is a lot less harsh than an object lighting. So the default lighting is meant for objects like trees that you can see right here. You can see that it's a fairly harsh lighting system, pretty bright on the front, quite dark in the back. We can tweak our character's lighting, or our model's lighting, so that it much more matches what an actor should look like. To do so, we are going to play with the lighting settings. So default, if you hover over this, convenient, this will tell you very broadly what some of the categories are. So I'm going to change it to actor and hit forge and set. Oh, I want to forge and set to this guy, not the other one. I was about to do it again. Forge and set, and there we go. That is a much more natural lighting for an actor, like a player or NPC. You also change it so that there's no lighting, which is, just about what you'd expect. There's also different lighting styles for things that you may never need. You can also directly tweak the lighting settings. So if this is our actor lighting, we can change the ambient so that it's 120. There we go, much brighter. You can change the, let's just turn it back to actor lighting, change the contrast so that it's 2000. Tends to be much darker overall. Think of it as like the lighting being made more, the shadows being made more extreme. Although it's probably in the opposite direction. So listen, sometimes I get very confused as to how Creator's Kit works. There we go, opposite direction. So the less the contrast, the deeper the shadow. As you can see, Now the ambient side is much brighter and the shadow side is much darker. You can also change the direction that the light's coming. So typically light will come from like a more southwest. I can change it so that it's the opposite direction. So let's say I move that to X and Y coordinates 30, 30. So if it was minus 30, it is now 30, 30. Forge and set. There we go. Lighting is now in the opposite direction. You can also change the Z value. So if you want the lighting to come from underneath, if we go minus 50, there we go. Very niche function. You may never have to use this. Let's bring it back to actor lighting. Okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to right-click this boat here, and we're going to send it to the Anvil. I want to have my character stand in this boat. Something I'm very familiar with doing for sailing. I'm going to now forge and set that. So our character is now in the boat. And it's a good time to probably rotate that boat so that it faces the correct direction. Yep, that's correct. As you can see, radius is off by quite a bit. So we're just going to increase that. 120, 150, 200. Beautiful. Our character is now standing in the boat. Now, what I've noticed here is that my character's feet are kind of sinking through the floor because the character is standing on the tile, on the exact height of the tile, and the boat's standing on the exact height of the tile, whereas the character should be standing ever so slightly above the tile, more in the boat. So what I can do a bunch of group transforms. What this is going to do is this will transform every object in a specific group. So right now I have group 1 highlighted. Instead, I'd rather modify group 8, which is going to be all of these objects. The only one I don't want to modify is the boat, because the boat should be on the ground. So I'm just going to set it to any different group, which we'll choose 1. So if I open this up more, I can see all my group transform options. So right now I'm going to be transforming group 8. I can either adjust or set all of the values for the translation, for the scaling, for the rotation. I can modify all of these at the same time for all of these models in group 8 by using adjuster and setter. So let's say I want to move the entire character model up in the Z direction by a full tile. I'm going to hit that adjuster to adjust by. And as you can see, as I hit that up arrow, it increased the Z value of all the models in group 8 by 1. If I hit forge and set, there we go. Now he's up higher. Now you'll notice that the amount that translation works by is relative to the scale. So because the head is scaled twice to 2 times the size, instead the Z value is doubled as well. So it's actually moved 2 tiles for the head, eye patch, and jaw. We're not going to worry too much about that. Pretty niche problem to have. But again, everything in group 8 moved, so the entirety of low, and the boat did not move because it was not in that group. I can also use the set function. So let's say I want to, instead of adjusting by, if I adjust by, well, first of all, actually let me set everything to 0. All the Z translate tile translation to 0. I can adjust by as much as I want. I'm going to adjust by subtiles because what I want to do is I want to get him just above the boat, not actually way above the boat. So adjust by subtile Z value, I'm going to do 10. As you can see, it increases the Z in the subtile to by 10. Forge and set. There we go. He's getting there. You can see his boot is still meshing with the boat. So I'm going to play with that a little bit more. So I could either adjust, let's say I want this value, the Z translate by subtile. Let's say I want that value to be 20. I can either adjust by another 10, like so, or I could set the value to 20. There we go. That's the difference between adjuster and setter. Adjust will add that value. Setter will set that value to the new value. As you can see, everything has now been set to 20, and this is actually a mistake of mine. I should have changed the head so that it would work in the head, eye patch, and jaw, so that they'd be in a different group, so I'd be modifying them a little bit differently. But yeah, that's why you got to be a little bit careful about your group transform. Let's try that. Okay, he is now more above the boat. You can see his boot is still kind of merging. I'm going to continue to adjust by small increments. Let's try that. There we go. Now he is kind of floating there a bit, but we're gonna call it at that. And let's get that head back down. So I'm going to change the group to 7 to adjust our 7 group. And I'm going to set those values, the Z value, to maybe minus 60. As you can see, it adjusted everything in the Z subtile. It set everything in the Z subtile to minus 60. Forward and set. Pretty close. So instead of using the setter, I'm going to just adjust it by small increments and see what we can get. Let's go down further. Okay, bit too much. Beautiful. Okay, there he is. He's now merged with the boat. He is not meshing with the boat, at least as badly. There we are. That is the group transformer function of the model Anvil. Yeah, okay. So let's say I want to change the color of his plate body. What I can do is I can find the plate body. We're just going to make sure we, no, that's the boat. Boat, I think this was the plate body. Again, the name doesn't have many important implications. It's mostly just important for simplifying, making sure it's less confusing for you when you're using the Anvil. Okay, I'm going to open the color swapper. I can just open it in this tab here, but I can also just hit swap on the object, on the model that I want to modify. Okay, so I'm brought to this tab, the plate body is selected, and the colors are shown. A lot of different models come with default colors. These colors are ones that, if I took away these, you would see what the true default colors of the plate body is, because a rune plate body is actually just a steel plate body recolored. Yeah, I know, that's pretty wild. Jagex actually scammed you by trimming your steel armor and turning it into rune plate. It ain't real. It's all fake. It's pretty sad, eh? Anyways, let's say I want to change the colors to something that I want to see on my steel plate body. Maybe I just want a really red steel plate. I can change the color that I want here. And the way that RuneScape recolors its models, in fact, this is probably not the best demonstration because a steel plate body is not a very colorful item. Maybe I can choose something a little bit different. What would work well? Help me out here. Actually, this would work extraordinarily well. It's rune plate body H1. Okay, we're going to do the fastest swap in the West. I'm going to change the model ID to the model ID of, I don't know why I did that. And we're going to hit forward and set. Oh dear. Oh dear. What did I do this time? Well, because rookie mistake. I chose the ground model. I need the male worn model. I'm going to take this value right here, going to enter it into our cache searcher, male worn item, add models, delete that old plate body, rename this to plate body, and forge and set. And yes, it is slightly offset because we need to bring it back up. Beautiful. Okay, something that we don't need, and I would just let it be for a while. We don't need this guy's arms, so let's quickly find out what the arms are. That looks kind of like hands. That looks, what is that? That looks like arms. 73. There we go. Got rid of his arms. Some models will have arms merged with the torso, and some won't. Low by default clearly had them separate, arms from his torso. Okay, let's go get back to business. All right, let's open up this plate body in the swapper. As you can see, there's a bunch of colors, recolors already set by default, and you can change them. So if I want to change this, in fact, let's just clear these colors and see what the default colors actually look like. Again, it's just a recolored steel plate body of some kind. Let's say I want to change the red. The way that RuneScape recolors its models is it takes a color value and it recolors everything of that exact color. So what I can't do is I can't take this little red triangle and color it differently from this little red triangle because they're both the exact shade of red. Instead, what I can do is I can recolor all of those shades together. So if I want to turn that blue, I can just find blue color, hit set on that red color, and hit forward and set. There we go. It is now blue. Let's say I want to change some of this gray to this green. There we go. I can do so. To make it a little bit darker and set this one. Beautiful. A little bit darker. Set that one there. There we go. You can also unset by just clicking that button again. There we go. What else do I want to show you here? There are so many different things. Okay, so that's how you set colors. Sometimes when you want to refine a color, let's say I've been playing with this purple. Let's say I want to get this exact shade of blue again. I can either just use this exact code. So if I want to turn this white part of the breastplate to this blue color, I can just enter in the code right here, -28999, and I'll even put a 2 at the beginning here. Hit enter, forge and set. There we go, exact same shade of blue. Let's say I want to find this exact green value again over here. What I can do is I can hit the find button and it'll find me the exact same shade. So if I want to instead set all these blues to that green, I can do so. You notice that sometimes the color code is slightly off. That's just because the translation between RuneScape's color system and like a real color system isn't exact. The color itself should be exact though, even if the numbers are slightly off. So that is recoloring. Let's say I want to make a silhouette of my character. Or I want to, let's say let's start one step at a time. Let's say I want to set all these colors to black. I can individually do that, or I can just hit set all. And it is now all perfectly black. Let's say I want to, first off, we can switch all the different models that we're adjusting from here. We can either hit swap and it'll show up here, or you can just use this drop down here. Either way works. Bring us back to our plate body. I can also, oh my gosh, I don't think you realize how much there is still to go through. And how long am I in this recording? Oh my goodness, an hour and a half. I'm actually dying here. Let's say I want to recolor everything to this color, this black color here. Now, for demonstration, we're going to use yellow. I can set everything like so. For every model, it is now set to this perfect yellow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This was the dream the Gowers always wanted. I'm going to clear everything. Note that that's going to clear. Oh my goodness, that function doesn't even work. It kind of works. It doesn't work as well as I'd like. Let's just say that. Who programmed this, eh? Let's clear all those recolors, and it'll bring everything back to its default colors. Okay. What you can also do, and let me, yeah, we're going to change models a little bit. First off, what I want to do, I don't want to lose this guy. I really like what I've created, just like we did with the setups before, or like we did with the custom models. I can save this as a custom model as well. So I'm going to call him Boat-Low. So if I clear this, I can load up Boaty-Low, and he's there. But for now, we're going to try something else. We're going to throw something else in the anvil. Something incredible like this tree. Okay. Let's, I'm just going to despawn him, put our man right there. And we're going to be modifying this object 102 with a different model. First of all, I'm just going to forge and set just so we can see our basic default tree. You know, looks as you might expect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch its textures. So this is, I'll be honest, I can't even remember how this works. We can change the textures that are on this model. This is currently a nice leafy texture. Anything that's textured will have a number that isn't -1. So -1 is not textured. -1 actually refers to the wood over here. Let's change this texture to 25, just because that is the number in my head. I cannot remember how textures are indexed. I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to live with that. So that has changed that texture to something interesting. Let's choose something. Let's choose something more interesting. That is a rooftop there. That is a different leaf. Those are hieroglyphs. You know, what I really want right now, what I really want is a lava cape texture, but I'm also not going to spend this entire tutorial finding it. So 20, a nice bookcase texture. I'm going to set both the top and the middle textures to that bookcase, and there we go. And just like colors, you can just click this button again to reset it back to normal. Okay, now let's say I have 2 of these trees. I'm just going to duplicate that. I'm going to offset this one by 2 in the X direction. I'm going to set its radius to a crazy high value. Yes. Let's say I recolor one of these trees. Let's change the trunk to this blue color. Recolor one of these trees. Let's say I want to take all these recolors that I've done, and I want to, let's make it more interesting. Let's say I want to take all of this, and I want to make the other tree that same way. I can just copy this, copy all the swapped colors and textures for our first object, go to our other object, and hit paste, and there we go. Copy and paste. Pretty standard function. I don't think that should confuse you too much. That is how we do some incredible things with the model Anvil. And to show some of my bigger projects that I've done with it, this is something I did for creating a bunch of videos for sailing for Jagex. I constructed this boat, as you can see, all these different models. And if we look at all these different recolors that I did not do. Sail, come on, help me out. Here we go. All these different recolors that I've done. I've saved this as a custom model, and I can now forge and set. And we get this beautiful boat. Yeah, so again, there's some pretty crazy things that you can do with this model Anvil to create entirely new creations. And something I want to demonstrate here while we're at it. Let's see. I'm going to uncheck this priority. Priority by default is unchecked. I'm just going to uncheck it for a second. What priority? Okay. Models have a priority system for when different faces collide. Sometimes it's a question of what shows above what. If you look at the base of this sail right now, in fact, you look at the entirety, you look at this spire at the back, it should be behind the sail, but for whatever reason is rendering in front. This is because the priorities are messed up on the boat, because the boat isn't an object that's supposed to exist as a single object in this game. It's really, in-game, it's composed of 100 different objects that are just placed beside each other. So obviously something's messed up with the rendering because you're not supposed to be able to do what I do. What you can do is you can hit the priority button if you're having rendering issues like this. Forge and set again, and it will reset everything to have the exact same priority. This has little artifacts of its own. If you take a look at these shields, you can see that the shield is colliding with the boat. It should render above the boat, but because we've used this sort of blunt hammer approach of setting the priority, it's going to now render behind. But everything else looks much better. As you can see, this spire is now actually in front of the sail when we look at it. The character isn't sort of phasing through different objects as well. So, although the shields are messed up, it's probably a worthwhile trade-off. If you're not having rendering issues, don't use priority. If you are, give it a try, see what it looks like. Okay, we're going to clear that. One of the last things I want to show you to do with the Anvil. Let's say I've created a model, and I've created a custom model, I've cleared the Anvil, but I want to bring that back to the Anvil. I can actually find the custom model in my model organizer and hit the Anvil button. That'll send the object back to the Anvil. So if I hit forge and set, there we go. There it is again. Now you'll notice, when we look at the organizer here, how do we get so many models? And how is this dropdown as massive as it is? Well, every time we hit forge and set, of course it created a new custom model that we could choose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear all the unused models, because there's quite a few that we don't need. And it'll take us back to just what is being used by our objects over here. Pretty handy feature. Okay, that I think wraps up the Anvil. Okay, we're now going to move on to our transmogging system. So if I want my player character to look like an entirely different player, or a character, or NPC, or object, I can do so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable right-click transmog, and I'm going to right-click an NPC. Let's choose Hades over here. Transmog. And I'm going to enable transmogrification. I'm also going to use the entity hider to hide my player character as well, so that they're not merging over each other. So as you can see, it'll copy all my player animations and apply them to the new model that I'm using as my transmog. I can make this even more specific, especially in the cases where I want to be a non-humanoid NPC, where my player animations aren't going to match. Right now, if I transmog into that giant spider, it's going to use, yeah, some pretty weird animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Transmogger section. As you can see, my current transmog is a giant spider model, which you'd also find as a custom model. You can set the radius just like you would with your regular objects. I'm going to set it to a complete custom system. And I'm going to find the animations of that spider. So 5325, 5325, and 5326 are the pose and walk animations of the spider. And there you go. Now my spider is happily crawling around. You can also do a bunch of other things. You can set more animations for more complex structures. Let's say I want to get this spider's attack animation, so I can change my attack animation. Let's see. 5327. 5327. So I'm going to add an additional swap. I swap out swap in 5327. And what's my attack animation right now? 423. 423. So now, when I attack, I will use a proper spider animation. Pretty cool. Now let's say I want to be a humanoid NPC. Let's say the Lumberjack guide. I'm going to transmog into him. Obviously, using the spider animations is not going to work. But instead of using the player animations, which exactly copy my real player animations, I'm going to use modified. And I'm going to reset so we're not dealing with these spider animations anymore. So now what modified does is it takes my player animations and uses them except for the changes that I specify. So if you see this Lumberjack guide right here, he's actually using animation, let's see, 813 as his idle, whereas my idle is 808. So I'm going to change that to 813. There you go. So now he's holding his staff properly. What I can also do is I can add more specific animation swaps like I did with the spider. Let's say every time I use the dance emote, I want to play a different emote. So dance, I know by memory, is 866. 867, I think, is wood cutting emote. So now, when I use the dance emote, it'll instead look like I'm wood cutting. So this animation swap takes the animation that I'm playing and swaps it for something else. Okay, next things. That is generally how animation swap is going to go. It doesn't get much more complex than that. What you can do is you can save the animation. I can save it as Lumberjack guide. So in the case that I clear and reset everything, I can just load up Lumberjack guide. I can choose just to load the model, just to load the animation, but I want to do both. And he's set back up, just as he was before. There's also a neat feature called the Auto-Transmog. So if you don't want to have to load an animation every time you reopen your client, you can actually take the path of the, let's see, you actually find the path for lumberjack.json and enter it in here. Enter it in here. So it would look something like users YourName.runelite creatorskit. It would be some like animations. I'll throw an example of what it would look like down the description and hit enable transmog. So now whenever you log in, your character is automatically transmogged into the character that you want it to look like. You know, the same thing for setups as well. You just enter in the path of the setup. So again, it'd be something like runelite creators kit setups my setup.json, and every time you open the client, that setup would automatically spawn in your world. But I'm not going to do that right now. Again, I'll show the formatting of what that path is going to look like in the description below. Okay. Last piece I think I want to do for this tutorial is talk about the model exporter. So for Blender artists, there's a lot of different model formats that you're probably used to. You're used to OBJ, PLY, GLTF. Some of those are going to be available, perhaps not in version 1.5.0. It might be 1.5.1, have yet to see. But the Blender option is going to be available by default. What this does is that it exports to a specific JSON format that I've created that a new add-on, a Blender add-on that I've created, can read into the RuneScape model. This is really convenient as it allows me to create materials that are only one material for every face color, which is extraordinarily convenient if you've been using Blender for RuneScape models up to this date. I can also export animations as well, which is incredibly convenient. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to start by making sure that Creators Kit enable right-click export is active. And what I can do is I can right-click just about anything and find the export option. So this would be the ground object for that piece of grass. This statue, it would be export statue. You have the Doomsayer here, which NPCs and players will have both model and animation options. And let me just turn off this transmog just so it's absolutely clear what we're doing. And re-enable. There we go. And just for the sake of it, let's give ourselves a Bandos Godsword. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure my settings are correct, what I want them to be. I do not want vertex colors, do not want T-pose. Right click and hit export model. There we go. Now we're going to go into Blender in a second, but first, before we do that, I also want to try exporting as vertex colors instead of face colors. If you don't know what that is, don't bother using it. It's a little complicated, but it can get some pretty authentic looking scenes out of it. Export model. Let's do face colors again. So turn off vertex colors, export to T-pose. There we go. And last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export the animation, which it's going to create a copy of my character and it's going to record the animation. Once it's finished, it'll say exported to your Blender models directory. Okay, let's move to Blender. Okay, so first off, we need to make sure that we have the add-on installed. The one that you're going to look for is called CK2Blender add-on. You're going to want to download this. Open up your Blender, go Edit, Preferences, Install. Now you're going to find the file that you downloaded and hit Install Add-on. It's going to appear in this menu here. You want to enable it and close. So to import the JSON files, we're going to use the hotkey Control-Shift-I. It's going to bring up your dialog, and you want to find your Blender models directory. So again, it's going to look like something like C:users, YourName, .runelite, creatorskit Blender models. If you really don't know where it is, there's a very convenient button in Creators Kit where you just hit this and it'll open up the proper directory. And now I'm going to find the thing that I created. So we exported 4 different options. The first was a really basic option. And there you go. There you go. He looks as he should. If you check his materials, you can see that there's only a few different materials, 47, which is a fair amount, but there's no duplicates for every single face, which is just wonderful. Let's import another one. This was using the vertex colors, which tries to mimic the shadowing that the lighting system that RuneScape uses. Let's now import the default pose. There you go. Especially useful for rigging. And finally, let's import the animation. This usually takes a second or two to load. There we go. And if we take a look at this animation, and let's just set this to 70. Beautiful, isn't it? All right, and I'm a particular fan of interpolating constant. So I think it really doesn't matter for this model too much, does it? But hey, I generally like that better. And that's how you import stuff from creatorskit into Blender. Okay, last things before we end off. Let's go through a couple different plugins that I like to use a lot for video creation that work really well with creatorskit. So Fashionscape has always been wonderful. It allows you to change whatever you are holding, and sometimes it's a little buggy, but you know, that's life, isn't it? And you can just very quickly store or add those features. Pretty great. Other plugins I like to use, we have, Blindfold. Blindfold is wonderful for getting a green screen going. So if I just place this object over here with Blindfold, I can make sure that runelite objects, which are the objects that creatorskit spawns, are enabled. Everything else can disappear. All this extra stuff that we don't need, that can all disappear. We can also use the Skybox plugin to create our green screen as well. There we go. It's a perfect green screen. Blindfold, very useful. Camera, always useful. Camera smoothing can be very nice. Entity hider, of course. And anything else I wanted to mention? Goody is coming out with a new camera plugin that allows you to keyframe your camera essentially to allow for crazy automated shots that'll do all these different things. So do watch out for that. Other than that, thank you for watching. It's been a real pleasure. I hope that this hasn't completely scared you off using creatorskit. I know that there's a ton going on, but I promise you, if you are a video creator or any other type of creator, once you get used to it, your life will become a lot better or a lot worse. I don't know. Have a great day.